My name's Christine Permomo. I live in the town of Coeymans. I've been involved in this clean air coalition and the clean air law since 2017. In March of 2019, after more than a year of discussion and review, the Albany County Town of Coeymans Board passed Chapter 80, which is known as the Clean Air Law. That law does limit, not prohibit, some businesses in our town from burning solid waste and tires. And this law at the time set a new clean air standard in the Hudson Valley. It was a big achievement for our town, which only has about 7,000 people. The law did pass with that board with a 3-2 vote. It was split along party lines at that time. This law actually came into being in 2017 because environmental activists and members in the town got word that the Lafarge Wholesome Cement plant in Ravenna was going to start potentially taking processed municipal waste to use as fuel. And the waste was going to come from Hartford, Connecticut. It would have been processed through this other company, and the residents very concerned about the potential of trash incineration went to the town supervisor, who started working with Mike Ewald, who is with Energy Justice Network, to help write the clean air law, to make sure that this would never happen in our town, so that we wouldn't become the garbage capital of the Northeast, polluting the air and the water, not only for our community, but for the Hudson Valley residents as well. So the law was passed, and unfortunately, we had a lot of opposition from some of the businesses in the town. They put up a slate of Republican candidates to, run against our town board. In 2018, they all lost. So now, as a result, these new candidates who made, the clean air law one of the issues in their election a factor. And so here we are today, now facing a new board who is wanting to make changes to the law. So we have a couple of very important people speaking on this today. The first one is Patricia Sibilia, who has the president of our League of Women Voters of Albany County. They have been very, very active in environmental issues around the community. So Patricia, turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. The League of Women Voters of Albany County is a volunteer-led organization of over 200 members who are actively part of the League of Women Voters in New York State and the National League of Women Voters organization. We're a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government and who works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and to hear and we endeavor to hear all sides and concerns around issues and to create dialogue to obtain best outcomes for people. The League has adopted advocacy positions on clean air, solid waste, public health, and preservation of natural resources for over 50 years of our 100-year history. We were strong supporters, as Christine noted, for the passage of the Coeymans Clean Air Law in 2019, which limits tire burning in the Lafarge Wholesome plant, located adjacent to the RCS middle and high schools. We are disheartened to learn about the proposed amendments to this law, as they will weaken the intended protections. The proposed change to move away from the World Health Organization standards to the less stringent EPA interim procedures is unacceptable. In addition, amendments that will now limit available monitoring equipment to only those deemed proven by the EPA allows Lafarge Wholesome too much leeway on the required monitoring. The same is true about the proposed amendment of the continuous monitoring system equipment language to add when commercially available. Unless the citizens are allowed to demand the monitoring they need to protect their health as stated in the current law, equipment may not be commercially manufactured to meet them. The true impact of the amendments is that monitoring will happen only once a year, which most likely will not represent the levels that continuous monitoring would detect. Deferring to the state and federal environmental agencies who set the minimum standards for industry to meet leaves the community at risk. And this is why it is up to local governments to be more protective where needed. It's typical for the state to freely grant permits for waste burning since state regulations allow it. However, these permits lack modern monitoring and disclosure requirements and have emission limits and have emission limits and waste testing requirements that aren't as protective as they ought to be. A company can follow state regulations and still be a large air polluter that is unhealthy for residents. State and federal regulations are not strong enough, and monitoring for most pollutants is too infrequent. Lastly, to include an amendment that strikes community enforcement from the current law is very disappointing. The town officials are bending in part to the threat of a lawsuit by Lafarge Holcim, but they are taking the same right away from the citizens to protect themselves by removing this language. The health and safety of citizens is critical, particularly those young students at the adjacent middle and high schools. We urge the Coeymans Town Board to consider this and reject the proposed amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. I would like to have Sarah Parksma, who is been involved in the clean air law advocacy and a Coeymans town resident. I wanted to just make note that I had misspelled her first name in the news release. There is no H at the end, as you can see, so please make note of that, folks. Sarah, if you could, kick it off here in terms of how you see this change to our clean air amendments and what it's going to mean for you as a resident in the town.
Certainly. Can you hear me okay? I would like to talk about just some very simple, real day-to-day concerns. I'm a new mother, and there's a lot of people with families in this community. And, it's something I've been thinking about, when I go to, buy food for my child, I look in all the ingredients. When you buy plastics, you look for what is made, what composes the plastics. Our air that we breathe should be no less monitored. We need to be very mindful of what we're breathing in. And if Lafarge is not kept to the high standards, who's to say that they're not going to relax what they are putting out into the atmosphere? So by relaxing this law, it's basically saying to Lafarge that it's okay to bring in more than 25 tons of garbage and to burn them. We deserve more than the minimum protections. The EPA standards and the standards set by DEC, those are the minimum guidelines, the way that I look at it. As a growing community, we have a lot of beautiful historical and environmental assets, and we just, we need to protect them. We need to protect our health. I'm really alarmed by it. I felt a great satisfaction and pride when the Clean Air Law was passed. And I certainly feel like the profits of Lafarge are overcoming and are more important than our health. And I think that's a horrible precedent to set. And, who's to say that these pollutants that they're going to be sending out aren't going to just ruin the generations to come? We have the high school, middle school, elementary students, all within miles of this plant. They're known to be carcinogens. And we need to say that it's not okay to have the minimum protections. We need more protections. That's really the majority of what I have to say, and I really thank everybody for their time and giving this their consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I am putting in the chat for everyone a link to a YouTube video that was produced by one of the Clean Air Coalition activists voluntarily, a video about, it's actually tweaked a bit because for the Albany County Clean Air Law, which was passed, but it was started because of the clean air law in the town of Coeymans, and Sarah's featured in that as well. It also gives excellent background on what's going on in the town regarding this bill. Next we have Matt Miller, who is our newly minted Albany County legislator for District 36. He is was a co-sponsor of the Albany County Local Law B, the Clean Air Act, and he's also an AP biology teacher at the Ravenna Coeymans Selkirk School District for what, 30 years, Matt?
Almost.
A long time. So thank you, Matt, for being here.
Sure, thank you. So Sarah and Patricia really did a great job covering all the key tenets, but I do want to just cover some of what's gone on as it relates especially to the county, but I did get involved in this, as you note, initially when it came before the Coeymans Town Board as a 28-year employee of the Ravenna schools as a science teacher there, and my concern for both staff and students and what we're being exposed to on a daily basis. So I came and spoke in favor of the Coeymans law multiple times, and in the interim I did get elected to county legislature in the district up. So to be clear, it's not the district that Lafarge is in, it's the next district up. But we decided to take that Coeymans law and try to put it out to the whole county. Our concern really was very much to protect the entire county from any kind of air pollution that could damage, all of our residents. So we took a more broader view of it and said, okay, we want to prevent any kind of waste burning facilities coming in. And we did not want to stop. The key thing I think we need to say is we're not trying to stop present industry. A lot of this argument has been that, we're going to force people out of jobs and force people out of the area. And that was our intent, not our intent at all at the county level. But we did want to say we don't want to bring any kind of new waste incinerators in, and we wanted to stop anything new from being burned in present facilities, such as tires. And we ran into the issue with obviously at Norlight with the AFFF that came up in the middle of the process. But I think is really important is some of the language changes and what they really do. So one of the problems that we had with the county bill is there is a loophole in the environmental conservation law, which the Lafarge is really trying to exploit right now. And it comes down to the fact that the town board, when they did run to take over the town board, they could run on a platform that said, sure, we're not going to repeal the law, because they knew if they did, then, the county law would take precedent. They would have to explicitly allow burning of these materials. And that is what their language is doing. Tricia mentioned that, but some of the language in there says that if you can burn something for fuel, then we're not going to consider it waste. And that would be tires and that would be garbage. And that is a very scary thought for people who live close to these plants. It really becomes very much, even for where this is cited and who's affected, is very much an environmental justice issue. Because they're able to go into a depressed area and say, hey, we'll throw some money around and we're going to, convince people that this is the right thing to do. And we're going to, don't worry, we'll take care of you. But in the meantime, they're going to pollute the air tremendously with these materials. They continue to cite various different issues with a Baltimore law that the Coeymans law was patterned after, but that's a very different state. They're very, very different issues. And they also want to state that the science, and again, I'm a science teacher, that the science says, oh no, this is safe to do. It's safe to burn tires. There's a lot of, tires can be used as a fuel for sure. And we can get, we can get deep into the weeds on the science and who's right and who's not right. They want to cite that the EPA says, that it's good to do this, and it's not what they say. It's the fourth level of what to do with tires, right above landfilling, right? So it's not the best option to do. And I also say that if there's a big concern, if the town thinks they can't enforce it and Lafarge says it's safe, then we should be having more emissions testing, right? The problem is, even when they put all their new stacks in, they do decrease greenhouse gases, one of their scientific arguments, which a little bit, but still it's a decrease, which is great. And they are good new stacks. But the problem is they don't deal with the stuff that'll be coming out of those stacks from the tires. Okay. And we're not, able to monitor that stuff, and it's going to be getting on top of everybody. So, I think, again, the language is the really important part in there, that they're going to be expressly allowing this to go on. During a lot of the hearings of the county, the Lafarge speakers, people that are supporting, or against our county law, kept citing that CDF, tire-derived fuel, is commonly done in cement plants around the country. And they kept citing 11 different places. And I'll tell you that I tried to research those 11. I couldn't find all 11. I found several, not 11, but nonetheless, the one thing I did find was that none of them were around schools. Okay, and here's the reality, and this is why I'm very much in opposition to the changes that Queen wants to make to their law. The high school and middle school are only hundreds of yards from the stacks. PDB Coeymans is only about a mile or two south, and A.W. Becker and my own home are barely 5 miles north. We're talking about taking pubescent and prepubescent children and exposing them to high levels of dioxins, furans, and all other kinds of contaminants that are extremely damaging to their young developing bodies. And that's the primary reason I'm out here against this. I think that's a part that we think the community members need to understand, that we are putting their own children at risk in making these changes just to serve business. It's really a case of profits over people. And I think that's what the community needs to really pay attention to, not get caught in the weeds on the signs. We can argue that all day long, but we're putting kids at risk with these amendments. So again, we really tried to the county to try to help protect the whole county, including Coeymans. And I would urge the community residents to come out and say, we don't want this. We don't want these particular changes. You can make changes to the emissions down in the county if there's things they're worried about enforcing, but they should be leaving the tire burning, and the garbage in particular is another concern people aren't even looking at. That's also in there. And the long-term effects of that need to be left out of these amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And just also want to point out what's really alarming about these amendments too is that it's going to completely exemplify from anything that, you know, is going to regulate them in terms of these kinds of tire and waste burning and poisoning our community. And not only the kids right across the street, the people that live in Coeymans, but anybody downwind, across the river. I mean, this is a Capital Region Hudson Valley issue. So I'm going to now open it up to questions from the folks who are from the media. If you would either raise your hands or, you know, we can call on you as that occurs. I don't know if I can see anybody. I'm not seeing any hands. Okay. Maybe in the chat, if you just want to say, I don't see any hands up. Patricia, is there a reason?
Hi.
Tyler. Okay,
Yeah.
Tyler. Yay.
Sure am.
Thank you.
So,
Okay.
so you're talking a little bit, I read the release, and it was talking about in some of the amendments, monitoring. The only thing that I think a lot of people might have distrust in, especially those familiar with the Norlight issue, is that monitoring doesn't always have people that are especially trusted to monitor.
Is that a question for a specific individual on the call?
Yeah, you in particular, and also Matt Miller.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely correct. I mean, we saw what happened up in Norlight for sure. They had on-site monitors and stuff was allowed anyhow. What the law particularly calls for is continuous monitoring using computer-based systems that would be live time. The community could watch and see. And, you know, I think the town has issues that, you know, whether they keep using that word commercially available. Some of that stuff can be done on a regular basis. Some of it, you know, may or may not be. I know there's discussions we did the county law, but unfortunately, some of those things are not even able to be well monitored right now. You know, again, if Lafarge totally thinks this is clean and healthy, then they ought to be very more open to monitoring. Whether it be, I think, Tyler, you're talking about is like the on-site monitors. We're talking about, you know, computer-based monitors that, you know, are measuring what's coming out of the stack on a regular basis and putting that on a live time feed that community can see what's coming out. That's what they're trying to avoid.
Just to follow up to that, there is, with that, there is a lot of science involved in certain levels, particularly on the site. Even if the community can monitor it, not everybody exactly might know what that means. How can you get that to a point where people can know, is there something bad going on? Is there not?
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to take that. That's not an easy question. I mean, once that information is available, I don't think it's one of those kind of things. You're right that I don't know that the regular average citizen is going to be able to tell whether that's a good thing or bad thing coming out there, but having that information available allows those who are deeply involved in to understand the science of it, can look at it on a regular basis and say, hey, this is no good, and sound the alarm for those who may not know. And not everybody's a scientist, right? So those people can do that and then sound the alarm for those who are not aware.
So I see a question from Rick Carlin. The current town supervisor is George McHugh. I would say he is the lead person, but there's also the other board members that are on the town board who take the lead from him. It's not a new law. It's the law that's in place now, and what they want to do is make amendments to the law. So it's basically going to have no teeth whatsoever. It's going to just be totally gutted. So they'll be unregulated at Lafarge, Wholesome, and be able to start burning all these tires, millions of tires that they want to start burning. And then potentially, opening the door for a lot of solid waste and garbage burning as well. So does that answer your question, Rick? We're not sure when they're going to vote on the changes. Tomorrow night, I put in the chat, there is town board. Okay, the public hearing is tomorrow night, and we have a feeling they may try to ram it through after the public hearing of an hour, 6 to 7 p.m. But we'll see. We don't know.
I think another part too, if I could add, that Patricia touched on, but I don't know, people quite always pick up on it, is one of the other changes that they want to do, which doesn't make any sense if they're worried about monitoring stuff, is to remove the ability for community members to file suit on this. So they're taking away that community suit issue. And I think the community, again, should be aware of that. They're taking out something that has no effect on monitoring. They claim to be concerned about their ability to enforce this. But taking that language out really, like as Christine said, sort of gives them carte blanche to do what they choose down there. And there's no need to even pull that part of it out.
Isn't it unconstitutional to say that someone can't sue? And has Lafarge filed suit, or they said they're going to sue over the current law?
We just hear that as one of the reasons why the town board wants to make the changes, because of the threat of a lawsuit. That's the only thing that I keep hearing and reading.
And that too, Christine, let's be clear, that was in the report that the town board produced. The town board put a 3-person board committee together to look at the law and make recommendations. And one of the recommendations was that we have to do this under threat of a lawsuit. If not, it's gonna be too expensive for us to fight.
I just want to say, to me anyway, that it just, I mean, as far as, Lafarge Wholesome filing a lawsuit, they could have done this like the day after the law was passed, and they didn't. So all of a sudden now this threat of lawsuit is coming up. And I don't know if it's because the Albany County law, that passed, where they were very much opposed, they were threatening that as well. So we haven't seen it yet. Doesn't mean they won't.
And just to be clear, again, the county law went differently from the Coeymans law. We went a different direction to do just a generalized ban, like countywide sort of ban on that new stuff. But yeah, it's, I think Melanie had a question in there as well.
Melanie, where are you?
Oh no, Mike wrote to Melanie, yeah.
Oh, Mike wrote to Melanie. Okay. Did you get your question answered?
Yes, I think so. One thing I wasn't clear, this is Melanie.
Yes.
One thing I wasn't clear about was the lawsuit. If you could just clarify the points on that. The town fears a lawsuit like what happened in Baltimore, and that they wouldn't be able to sustain having to deal with that. What's your response to that?
I think, Mike, would you like to respond to that, please? Because you're the one that has been nitty gritty into the law. I'm not a lawyer, I'm a nurse.
Sure, yeah, no problem. So I am a lawyer, but barred in Pennsylvania. But I'm the one that wrote the Baltimore Clean Air Act, as well as the Coeymans Clean Air Law. The arguments that were brought in Baltimore, there were 11 of them, and the federal court there, just like another federal court on a different but similar law I wrote in Pennsylvania, upheld the law on constitutional questions, which are one of the main ones that Lafarge has been arguing, on things like equal protection, which was meant for freed slaves, but also gets used by corporations claiming to be persons under the law, saying that this law discriminates against us. Well, the federal court in Pennsylvania and the federal court in Maryland dismissed both of those and upheld the local laws under those kinds of arguments, and also under due process arguments, which are other types of constitutional claims. What struck it down in Maryland was preemption law. We feel that was inappropriate. It was appealed and the city dropped the appeal, unfortunately, so that decision stands for Maryland. But that was about Maryland law. It is not something that will pertain to New York. So that's not something that needs to be feared in New York. The arguments that we brought in New York are ones that have been upheld in other places.
Okay, thank you. Tyler, you're asking about pollutants, how far they travel. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I saw the answer. That's and that's really interesting that they can. I'm looking at. So you're talking about. Well, Mike was talking about in here. He was saying some can travel as far as the Arctic, some are more local. What types are regional? Because you're talking about some of the cities and towns around here that could be affected by this, other than Coeymans, of course.
Sure. So most of them are going to be regional. A lot of times you see different numbers tossed out, like 17 miles, I've heard an agency once say, or 30 miles. So a lot of the emissions are going to be regional. There's a study out of New York City that was for the incinerator in Baltimore, actually for about the city of Baltimore's incinerator. And it found that the particulate matter, the fine particulate matter that we know causes increased in a lot of like heart attacks, strokes, people dying early from those things. They found that just that one pollutant causes an estimated $55 million in harm to health every year across about 6 states, including New York, coming from Baltimore, from that one pollutant, which has also been found by scientists at Harvard to increase the deaths from COVID-19. So a lot of it is pretty regional, but regional can be a pretty big region.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions? I don't see anything else in the chat at this time.
The only last thing that I'm interested in is kind of how it got, if anyone knows how it got this way, how it was zoned this way, that they were able to have this tire burning so close to a skull.
How it got this way. All I know is this plant's been there for many years. They have been cited in the past for spewing mercury into the atmosphere. We know that this whole idea of, burning trash and tires instead of fossil fuels saves them money at these plants, the cement plants. And I think the opportunity came to, potentially have a proposal from this company, Mustang. I could send the link. Yeah, they were going to have a contract with the state of Connecticut, trying to get their waste incinerated because the state of Connecticut lost their incineration plant. It was aging, it was falling apart. They weren't going to fix it, build a new one. So they were going to ship it here. And Lafarge happened to be one of them that entertained those proposals. So, and it was all done without the knowledge of the town. The state didn't know about it. It's kind of almost like what happened at Norlight with the burning of the AFFF. That's my take on it.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for attending. And I hope some of you are able to, at least be on the Facebook Live public meeting tomorrow night. And again, thanks so much for your time. And we look forward to seeing your reporting on this very important issue where, once again, our communities are not just, the town of Coeymans, but we are facing a lot of pushback from these huge corporations in terms of, their ability to pollute our citizens in our local and state governments, and are just not protecting us the way they should. So thank you.
Thank you.